Adam and Eve, cast out of Eden, bore children in a world now cursed with toil and thorns. Their first son was Cain, whose name meant acquired, a sign of Eve, as hope that perhaps he was the promised one who would crush the serpent as head. Soon after came Abel, whose name meant breath or vapor, a reminder of life's fragility. The brothers grew into men with different callings. Cain tilled the soil, breaking ground with sweat and strength. Abel tended flocks, guiding sheep across pastures. Both labored under the shadow of Eden, both living in a world scarred by sin, yet both with the chance to worship God. When the time came, Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. Abel brought the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. Scripture says, "And the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor." Why? The Bible doesn't say it was the type of offering alone, but the heart behind it. Abel offered his best in faith. Cain gave something but not his best. Cain's face darkened. His heart burned with jealousy. And the Lord said to him, "Why are you angry? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." God warned him. Sin was like a beast waiting to pounce. But Cain did not listen. Cain's offering reminds us that God doesn't just see the gift. He sees the heart. Abel gave in faith, Cain gave in pride. Worship without faith is empty. Cain's heart burned. His brother Abel, his younger brother, had been accepted, while his own offering was rejected. The sting of envy twisted into hatred. The warning God had spoken still echoed. Sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. But Cain did not master it. Instead, sin mastered him. One day, Cain spoke to Abel in the field. Scripture does not tell us the words, only the setting, a quiet field away from others. The soil Cain had tilled now became the stage for the first act of bloodshed in human history. There, driven by jealousy and rage, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. The first murder. The first spilling of human blood. A brother's hands became stained with a brother's life. Then the Lord spoke. His voice cut through Cain's false silence. "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain replied with defiance, not sorrow. "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" But God, who sees all, answered, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." The soil that Cain worked, the very earth beneath his feet, had become a witness against him. Abel's blood was not silent. It cried for justice before the throne of God. And the Lord pronounced judgment. "Now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth." The farmer, tied to the soil, was now severed from it. The ground that once gave food would now resist him. His punishment was not swift death, but exile, an endless wandering. "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." Cain feared vengeance, though he had shown none to Abel. But God, even in judgment, showed mercy. Not so. "If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And the Lord placed a mark on Cain, so that none who found him would kill him. Cain then went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Abel's voice was gone from the earth. But Hebrews 11:4 tells us, "By faith Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain, through which he was approved as righteous," God testifying about his gifts. And through faith, though he is dead, he still speaks. Abel's life was short, but his faith still speaks. Cain lived but wandered, cut off from the land, cut off from peace, and most tragically, cut off from God's presence. The story of Cain and Abel reminds us that jealousy, if left unchecked, becomes destruction. God warned Cain, but Cain ignored him. Sin's power is real, but so is our choice. We too are our brother's keeper. Love protects, envy kills. And while Abel's blood cried out for justice, one day another blood, Christ's blood, would cry out for mercy and forgiveness. Cain walked away from Eden's shadow, away from the presence of the Lord. The mark of God protected his life, but it did not heal his heart. He became a wanderer, settling in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Genesis 4:16. There Cain built a city and named it after his firstborn son, Enoch. Though cursed to be a restless wanderer, Cain sought permanence in stone and walls. His city was not a monument to God, but to himself. Generations followed. Cain's line grew, and with them came achievements and corruption alike. Scripture records their names not to exalt them, but to show the path of sin's legacy. Irad, Mehujael, Methuselah, and then came Lamech. Lamech was the seventh from Cain, and his life mirrored the depth of Cain's pride. He took not one wife, but two, Adah and Zillah, the first man recorded to distort God's design for marriage. Through his sons came advances: Jabal, father of those who lived in tents and kept livestock; Jubal, father of all who played the lyre and pipe; Tubal-Cain, a forger of bronze and iron, the first to master weapons of war. Humanity was growing in skill, knowledge, and culture, but not in righteousness. Civilization advanced, but sin advanced faster. Lamech boasted to his wives, "Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. Where Cain killed in secret and feared vengeance, Lamech killed in arrogance and sang of it." Violence, pride, and corruption spread deeper into Cain's line, but God's plan was not abandoned. After Abel's death and Cain's exile, Adam and Eve bore another son, Seth. Eve declared, "God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him." Through Seth came a different legacy, a line that sought the Lord. Seth's son Enosh marked a turning point. Scripture says, "At that time people began to call upon the name of the Lord." While Cain's descendants built cities and weapons, Seth's descendants built altars and sought God's presence. The two lines now ran side by side, one of rebellion, one of faith. Cain's city shouted of human pride. Seth's line whispered of divine hope. But as generations grew, these two paths would not remain separate. They would one day cross, and corruption would spread even to those who once called on the Lord. From Abel's blood came a reminder of sin's cost. From Seth's birth came a reminder of God's mercy. Humanity stood at a crossroads between faith and rebellion. Cain's legacy shows us how sin does not end with one act. It spreads. It multiplies. His pride birthed a culture where violence was praised and vengeance was celebrated. But Seth's birth reminds us, God always provides hope. When sin abounds, grace is not far behind. The world may descend into darkness, but God preserves a remnant who call upon his name. The two lines of mankind stretched forward, Cain's steeped in violence and pride, and Seth's marked by prayer and hope. Yet as the generations unfolded, the gap between them began to close. From Seth's line came men of faith. Among them was Enoch, the seventh from Adam in Seth's line, a striking contrast to Lamech, the seventh from Cain. Where Cain's descendant boasted in bloodshed, Enoch walked humbly with God. Scripture records something extraordinary about him. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. Enoch did not taste death. While the world around him embraced corruption, he walked so closely with the Lord that God himself brought him into his presence. His life was a beacon that even in a world unraveling, intimacy with God was possible. But most of mankind chose another path. As Cain's legacy grew, violence multiplied. Men took multiple wives. Clans fought for dominance. Lust and pride drove their choices. Genesis 6 tells us that when mankind began to multiply on the face of the earth, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them as wives. Whether these were rulers abusing their power or angels crossing forbidden boundaries, the result was the same. Corruption deepened. The Nephilim, mighty men of renown, walked the earth in those days. But their fame was not righteousness, it was conquest. Their strength did not build peace, it built terror. The world that God had once called very good now groaned under the weight of sin. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The echo of Cain's jealousy had now become the song of nations. Abel's blood was not alone. Millions of cries rose from the earth. And the Lord grieved. "I regret that I have made them," he said, "for I am grieved in my heart." This was not the regret of a mistake, but the sorrow of a creator watching his creation twist into ruin. Sin had not only broken man's relationship with God, it had infected every corner of life. The Lord declared, "I will blot out from the face of the land the human beings I have created, people, animals, creatures that move along the ground, and birds of the sky, for I regret that I have made them." Judgment was coming. The world that began with Eden was nearing its end. But in the midst of corruption, one man stood apart: Noah. Genesis tells us, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. Like Abel, he offered true faith. Like Enoch, he walked closely with the Lord. In a world drowning in sin, Noah's obedience became the vessel of salvation. The world now stood at a crossroads. Cain's line had filled the earth with violence. Seth's line, though faithful at first, was being swallowed by corruption. Only Noah remained righteous, chosen to carry forward God's promise. Judgment was no longer a distant warning, it was near. The floodgates of heaven would soon open. From Cain to Lamech, sin multiplied. From Seth to Enoch, faith endured. The question is not whose blood runs in our veins, but whose path we choose to follow. Cain's path ends in wandering. Abel's path speaks through faith. Enoch's path leads into God's presence. The world before the flood reminds us God's patience is vast but not endless. He gives warnings. He sends examples, but a day comes when His justice arrives. The world was filled with corruption, and the cries of violence rose to heaven. From Cain's jealousy to Lamech's boast, sin had multiplied until every thought of mankind was bent toward evil. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. In him God saw hope. Through him, God would save humanity, not because of Noah's strength, but because of Noah's faith. God said to Noah, "I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I'm surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of gopher wood." God gave precise instructions. The ark would be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. It would have rooms, a roof, and 3 decks. Every detail was a design of salvation. Noah obeyed without question. Day after day, year after year, he built as his neighbors mocked. The hammering of wood became a sermon of judgment, a warning that few believed. When the ark was ready, God commanded Noah to bring in the animals, 7 pairs of clean animals for sacrifice and food, 2 of every unclean animal, birds of every kind. And they came just as God had spoken. The sight was a wonder. Lions and lambs, ravens and doves, creeping creatures and mighty beasts, all walking toward the ark. Still the world laughed. Still they mocked. Until the day the door shut. It was not Noah's hand that sealed it, it was God's. The skies broke open. Springs burst from the deep. Rain poured down for 40 days and nights. Rivers rose. Mountains disappeared. The proud cities of Cain's descendants vanished beneath the waves. Every living thing that walked the earth perished except Noah, his family, and those within the ark. The world of Abel and Cain was no more. The earth itself had been washed clean. For 150 days the waters covered the land. The ark floated in silence upon a sea without shore. Then God remembered Noah. The waters began to recede. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Noah sent out a raven which flew back and forth, then a dove which returned with an olive leaf, a sign of life returning. At last the ground was dry, and God said, "Come out of the ark, you and your family." Noah, his wife, his sons, and their wives stepped onto a renewed earth. The silence after the storm was broken by the cry of animals, the flutter of wings, and the song of thanksgiving. The first thing Noah did was build an altar. He took some of the clean animals and offered burnt offerings to the Lord. The aroma pleased God, and he declared, "Never again will I curse the ground because of humans. Even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood, never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done." God blessed Noah and his sons, commanding them to fill the earth. And he gave them a sign. "I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth." The rainbow became a reminder of God's mercy, that judgment would never again come in the form of a flood. The story that began with 2 brothers had now reshaped the entire world. Abel's blood cried out for justice. Cain's pride unleashed a legacy of violence. But Noah's faith preserved humanity through the waters of judgment. Cain wandered. Abel's faith spoke. Noah endured. And through this story we are reminded that God is both just and merciful. The flood was not just about judgment, it was about renewal. The same God who heard Abel's cry of blood also heard Noah's cry of faith. We too face choices. Will we live like Cain, building cities of pride, or like Abel, offering worship in faith? Or like Noah, walking in obedience even when the world mocks? The rainbow reminds us God keeps his promises. Judgment is real, but so is salvation. And just as Noah was saved through the ark, we are saved through Christ, the greater ark who carries us through judgment into life. Thank you for joining this series, Cain and Abel, Blood and Faith. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Bible stories brought to life.